Hi everyone, happy Sunday. If you're new to the channel, I moved to Panama in 2019 from the US where I was living in California. Primarily, my move was motivated for quality of life, financial reasons. I think I was 55 when I decided to move and just figured I could live a better life that was aligned with my personal values and how I wanted to live my life, a little more stress-free and tranquil than the US was going to be offering me as I got into my older years. Today, I'm going to talk about the best things about Panama, and of course, that leaves the worst things about Panama. This is all just my opinion based on my experience, and yes, many of these things apply to other countries, but I live in Panama, and that's what this video is about. So we'll start with the best things about Panama. They're not really in chronological order, but the first thing is the people, the Panamanian people. Ever since I visited, I just found the Panamanian people to be friendly, helpful, kind of fun-spirited, and then after I moved here, I discovered how resilient they are as a people, and I love the national sense of pride that they have for their country, and I love that they embrace their traditions. The parades are amazing, the cultural fairs and festivals that happen, and just that great sense of pride, and also just how open-minded they are with the mix of cultures that are here in Panama, including those of us from, the North America, US and Canada. I think it's challenging to have a large melting pot of people, and the Panamanians definitely seem to embrace people from different countries, different cultures. Not 100% of the time, obviously, but for the most part, I think I've had more positive experiences on that side than very few negative experiences. I also really appreciate that the Panamanians are very family focused, and that's very important to them. The sense of community and just family gatherings, family celebrations. They support one another, and I find that very endearing. And I love seeing, people getting together and celebrating events. And right now at the neighboring house, there's a couple of cars of, family members, and they are cooking the most amazing smelling food. It's just incredible. It's inspiring me to get something in the Instant Pot a little bit later. I bought a pork tenderloin, so I'm gonna put that in the Instant Pot. Number 2 would be my sense of safety. When I first moved here, I thought I was gonna need to feel secure and live in a high-rise with a security guard, and a secure building, because as a solo female, I just kind of thought that that's how I would feel safer, or to live in a gated community where there was, again, a security guard. And as I've spent time here over the years, I feel much safer here than I did in the US. I am aware of my surroundings. I don't, let my guard down per se, but I'm not stressed out about it. It's not like an undercurrent. I am on a little more high alert when I'm in the city, but in general, I just feel very safe here. I live alone in a house, and I don't have a dog. I do have security cameras, but I just feel safe. There's not like a time where I feel an undercurrent of, violent people around me. There is a lower crime rate. It's not a big gun culture, so there's not, a lot of gun violence to consider. There's no mass shootings. Yes, there is some isolated gun violence, but there's no mass shootings. Thank God there's never been, a school shooting. You don't really hear of police killing anyone. And the police aren't militarized and weaponized. So that also helps contribute to my feelings of personal safety. I would say for the most part, there's a lot of just crime of opportunity. Where I live in El Valle, people might steal tools or propane tanks. I haven't had that happen. I don't close my gate when I go out for the day. If I'm going to be gone for a long time, I might close my gate. If I'm going to go to Panama or down to Coronado, I might close my gate. But I haven't had any issues, but some people have. And I've said this before in different videos, like sometimes certain houses are a target. Like no matter who lives there, that house is going to be a target for some type of, break-in or theft, which is kind of odd that it would just depend on the location. But maybe people know that it's somehow easier to break into, or maybe they have a personal vendetta against the owner of the house. I don't know. 3 would be the natural beauty. Panama is just a stunning country. It's this narrow strip of land between 2 oceans, and you could be at the Pacific side and then the Atlantic side in the same day. Like if you're in Panama City, I would definitely encourage you to go visit Portobello. There's a lot of historical sites there, and you get a sense of the Caribbean vibe. And also there's some decent snorkeling over there in Portobello, and it's only maybe like 2 hours from Panama City. So between, the 2 oceans and miles of beaches, and some beaches are good for surfing, some are great for shell collecting. Then you've got like all the islands. There's the San Blas Islands, there's Boca Chica, there's the Pearl Islands, there's Bocas del Toro. So there's so many beach options: boating, fishing, surfing, paddleboarding. There's rivers, there's waterfalls, there's mountains for hiking. It's just got an incredible, diverse range of natural beauty. And I think that's one of the things I really love about Panama, and one of the best features of Panama is just all that natural beauty. Even Panama City is beautiful. The skyline is just amazing. It's this very modern city in this backdrop of this tropical rainforest, this lush environment. And then of course you have Casco Viejo, which is a beautiful part of Panama City, the old part where you have that beautiful Spanish colonial architecture. 4th on the best things about Panama, according to Patty, are the indigenous tribes. I read different things, like whether there's 6 or 7 indigenous tribes, and a couple of them are very, very small. But I love that they're is a large population of indigenous culture in Panama. I haven't experienced that before, and to me there's just something to hold in reverence about these old traditions and cultures that are still thriving and fought hard to do so. There was a revolution in 1925 because the government of Panama was actually trying to have the indigenous cultures give up their ways and adapt to like the modern, ways that Panama had at the time. I just really appreciate that there are the indigenous tribes. Not that I know a huge amount about them, but I know that there's wisdom and a respect for the environment and traditional ways. And so I find that something that's a top benefit of living in Panama, the exposure to that indigenous culture and wisdom. Number 5 would be the stability of the government and the economy. And also it's one of the larger stable economies in Central and South America. So of course that's always comforting. I mean, we see stories coming from other countries where there's instability, and that comes with higher crime rates, higher, acts of violence. Is the distribution among the Panamanians and different parts of the country equitable? No, but that's not my business being an expat in Panama. I do see the inequity. I do hope that there'll be progress made. But in general, at least, due in large part to the canal and the revenue from the canal, and also the banking industry, there's a stable economy and a stable government. And that is something very much appreciated. Number 6 on the best things about Panama is that public health care, if you don't have insurance, is very affordable. As you know, I had a 2-night hospital stay a few months ago and then had gallbladder removal surgery. And if I combine the surgery, the 2 nights in the hospital prior to getting the surgery, and all of my pre-op tests, it was probably all under $500. That's amazing. So you can live here and have public health care without insurance, and you can self-insure. If you have savings that's dedicated specifically toward your health care, it's doable. I am looking into health insurance now, and the health insurance is more affordable. I think one of the plans I'm looking at is under $200 a month, and there's no way I could have health care at that expense in the US. So I'm very grateful to have that option here, but I am looking at the health insurance option for if I have a disease that's, needs like treatment, or if I had something that needed exploratory surgery, or just, the comfort of being in more modern facilities. But I was very happy with the care that I received, though it did take a little bit to get into the system. But once I got in, the care was good. Number 7 is the jubilado discounts. So when you move to Panama and get your residency, no matter what residency you have at a certain age, I think it's 55 for women and 60 for men, because of your age, you qualify for the 𝐏𝐲𝐬𝐺 discounts. And they're great. You get discounts at restaurants, discounts on hotels, discounts on airfare that's, leaving Panama City, or I guess it's airlines that are flying in and out of Panama. You get discounts on your electric and water bill, which are pretty low anyway, and discounts on certain health and medical services. I didn't even ask about that for my surgery because it was so low cost anyway. I was happy to pay the full price. And also, apparently there's discounts on like legal services. I haven't asked, for that. I haven't talked to my attorney about that because I think the fees are reasonable anyway. Number 8 is that Panama uses the US dollar. So there is stability and ease in having the country use the US dollar. It's tied to the US dollar. They do have their own currency, and you'll often see coins, the Balboa coin, for example, which they were going to eliminate, but they decided not to, and that was kind of nice. They're convenient, these dollar coins. Even though they're heavy, they are convenient to use. So it's easy to travel back and forth from the States with the US currency, and it's tied to the dollar, so it's fairly stable. Number 9 for me, I've said this before and I really can't pinpoint why, but I like that Panama is a small country and that there's a lot of undeveloped space. There's just a lot of rugged, undeveloped land, and I like that when you're driving, you just see, mountains and ocean views and big stretches of land that's just green and lush. And I, for some reason, just really appreciate that. I like that you can just travel around the country pretty easily. There's just that one main road that goes through the country, the Interamericana, and within a few hours you can be in different areas for visits, get to the beaches pretty easily, get to the mountains, travel between provinces, and with the affordability of small hotels, it's nice to explore and have different areas that you can explore within the country, or go spend a few nights in the city and experience some of the great restaurants that are there. Number 10 is that there's no tax on income that's earned elsewhere. So my income that's earned in the US is not taxed here in Panama. I don't have a work permit, so I don't work in Panama for a Panamanian company. So I work online, and my income that goes to the US isn't taxed in Panama. So that's a nice benefit. If you have income that comes from Panama, like if you start a brick and mortar store or service industry in Panama, then you can expect to pay taxes. Even my Airbnb, because Airbnb doesn't deposit funds in Panama, they will only pay to my US bank account. So that income is actually US income, and I'm taxed in the US on that. Number 11 on the best things about Panama is the lower cost of living. Even when I was renting places, the rent was much more affordable, even in Valle, where it can be much more expensive than other areas. At one point, I think I was paying $900 for a small 2-bedroom house, which you could not find that in, like a larger town or suburb in most places in the US, especially where I was in San Luis Obispo, California, which is one of the most expensive places to live. And prior to that, I was living in Los Angeles, which is also kind of a higher cost of living area to live in. And as I've talked about, when I bought my house, that was affordable for what I got, and putting the money into the renovation was affordable and not something that I could have afforded to do where I was living in California. Even the condo that I originally was supposed to buy in Gorgona at Royal Palm, that was under $200,000 for an oceanfront condominium. There's no way I could have afforded that probably anywhere in the US. You just couldn't get that. My utilities are lower, my car insurance is lower, my cell phone bill is lower, and my health insurance will be lower once I get that. And I'll do a video on that process. Groceries, I'm not really sure, because I've never really been one to like track the cost of groceries, but I know that if I want Western products, they come at a premium price. But if I find brands that are not like the Western brands, then it's more affordable. In the city, restaurants are generally, a little higher cost, but here in Valle, we have a nice range of, quality restaurants now, especially because the Hyatt La Compañía is open, and they have 3 restaurants on the property. So yeah, you can spend $25 on an entree, but you can go somewhere and get a $5 meal. So it's nice to have those options. Number 12 would be that you can live in luxury, and you can also live on a fairly modest budget. I think some people have this misconception that, Panama is supposed to be, affordable for everyone who wants to move here on a modest income. And they don't understand that there are millionaires here. There's Panamanian millionaires. There's people with, beautiful estates, and, that they have staff, and they have, horse stables, and they have businesses that generate a lot of income. I mean, there's people in banking industries. There's the Novi family that own the Novi chain of stores. There's the Do It Center owners. There's a lot of, wealthy Panamanians, and there's wealthy foreign people who live here. So I think the beauty is that you can be, a wealthy individual and live in luxury, and you can have a more modest income and live safely in a modest home or apartment, but it's safe, and it's probably going to be in a really pretty environment, either in the mountains or close to the beach. The city would be a different story. I don't know, the affordability of the city, but I think in general, things are a little bit more expensive in Panama City, as you would expect in any major city. 13 would be the temperate climate. it basically stays the same temperature range. And of course, this depends on where you are in the country. But in general, like in Valle, we can have like 70 degrees at night, and at the hottest times of year, maybe it gets into the low 90s. So it's very easy on the body, on the bones, on your joints, unless I guess humidity affects your joints or your allergies or something, but it's a very temperate climate. There's no extremes of hot or cold. The dry and rainy seasons are different in that rainy season, obviously we have rain and high humidity. Dry season, lower humidity, and generally that's when we have our high winds. But you know, it's just easy to live in a comfortable climate, that tropical climate. Where I am in the mountains, I love just having the windows open and, you know, smelling the lush greenery or the floral fragrances that waft in at night. Of course, that does come with, you know, the weed whacker noise, the barking dogs, the, you know, things that are, the businesses that are driving by in their trucks collecting metal and selling fish. But I just really appreciate the climate. I love that we are below the hurricane belt, so there's not any risk of hurricane damage. We do get intense rains. Sometimes that rain can be from a hurricane, but we will not get the winds from a hurricane. We'll get the rain that's coming off of the hurricane system. We do get mudslides that can be deadly, flooding that can be destructive in rainy season, and especially toward the end of rainy season, October, November. If you're driving in Panama and it's a heavy rain, just pull over, wait for the rain to pass and the flooding to clear, because it can be dangerous and scary to drive in a torrential downpour. The visibility gets to like nothing, and it's stressful. So it's best just to pull off and wait until that flooding drains away. Apparently we're not on a major fault line. The earthquakes that we get are not as high magnitude as they were in California. That said, I haven't entirely researched that fully, maybe because I don't want to know that we might be on a high magnitude potential fault line. And don't tell me if you know. I don't want to know in the comments. I still have PTSD from the earthquake in 93, I think it was 93, in Los Angeles, the Northridge earthquake. So I don't want to know if we're on a major fault line. Number 14 for me is that it's close, a quick flight to get to the east coast of the US where I have family. I do also have family in California and Washington State. I haven't actually flown to see anyone there yet, but it's a quick flight to the US. And I like knowing that I can get there relatively quickly. Number 15 is mostly reliable internet and electricity and water service. Mostly reliable. So we'll leave it at that. Those are my top 15 best things about living in Panama. Now, let's talk about the worst things. Number 1 would be the trash, the littering, and the waste management. That's not efficient. It's definitely an issue, and it can be a health risk. Certain parts of the country where you'll, see piles and piles of trash piled up high. It's not healthy for the people that live on those streets. And it's shocking to see people litter. It's shocking to see people throw bags of garbage out of their car window when they're leaving the beautiful natural mountain areas. It's very startling to see people just be on the beach and drop beer cans and to-go containers that are styrofoam and just leave them there. I mean, I get startled every time I see it. I mean, I don't even want to have like the smallest of wrappers, fly out of my car, or like a receipt that's in a grocery bag. If it lands on the ground, I pick it up. So that's very startling to see. And certainly the waste management, if there was an investment in higher efficiency waste management systems, it could be incredible. I mean, it really could be incredible. There's not a lot of recycling. We do collect recycling in Panama, and then it gets sent to different countries that handle that type of material, whether it's the glass, aluminum, cardboard, even oil, like used cooking oil. They will collect that, and that gets sent to Europe for using as biofuel, I believe. So, you'll see trash in, at the beach, in the ocean, the rivers. It's hard to see. It's just hard to understand, why it happens. But there are people and organizations that are trying to bring education to the school children, the school-age children, because, it starts with education, and then they can inform the parents on, why it's important not to litter, and also burn trash and burn plastic. The landfills, I think, are full. There's no more room at the landfills, and the one in the city apparently catches fire once a year, maybe in the dry season, or maybe they set it on fire. I don't know, but that's not healthy. The air quality gets very toxic. I've driven into the city when the landfill was on fire, and it's pretty startling to see that. Number 2 would be a lack of education in the rural areas and the inequality of resources. Even here in El Valle, the kids don't necessarily go on to high school. So maybe they have like elementary school or up to middle school education, but they, might not have high school education. And going to college is a very, very small percentage of kids from even El Valle would be going on to college or a trade school. So that's unfortunate, because that limits the opportunities for the young people and their families. It would be really nice to have education for them to be more computer literate, because there are a lot of opportunities online. So in these smaller rural communities, if there was a way to get education for online training, encourage them to have online jobs, or starting some kind of small business, that would definitely benefit smaller rural communities. Number 3 would be the animal abuse, neglect, and the stray population. It's hard to see. It's definitely hard to see the malnourished dogs, dead animals, because there's so many strays that are just running around, that you do see a lot of, dead animals. And there is neglect and animal abuse. Panama is becoming more strict on the animal abuse, and in fact there's a number for people to call to report animal abuse, so that is a good sign. A lot of people will just abandon their animals. They might have pets and then they'll just bring them out into the countryside and let them go, or here in Valle, a lot of people will come and just leave their animals because they know that we have a lot of people that are part of the spay and neuter program, and maybe they assume that the animal might find a home. So that's definitely hard to see. And the incessant dog barking, that's hard to hear, because you think, this poor animal is trying to communicate something. It wants something, right? I think sometimes they're just tied up and maybe left without food for long periods of time. So that's definitely hard on the heart to see that. Number 4 of the worst things about Panama would be the bureaucracy, inefficiency, and the mañana mindset. So those things can be very frustrating, especially when you first move here and you're dealing with the bureaucracy of, getting your immigration and residency status, opening up a bank account, turning on the utilities if you're getting something in your name with Naturgy, the electric company, or Idan, the water company, or your internet provider, or your cell phone provider, buying a car, getting car insurance, or if you're buying a house, or even just renting. When you first arrive, you're kind of swamped with all these things that you rely on government offices or businesses, and you definitely have to have patience. I am still waiting on getting a certificate of occupancy for my casita build, and that's been over, we're getting on like 2 years. So I haven't been able to get Naturgy to hook up the electricity to the casita. It was going to be on a separate meter. Right now it's just on my meter, but I'd like to just have it set, get the certificate of occupancy, get that meter installed and hooked up. So those things are definitely frustrating. If you're dealing with any, deliveries, or sometimes like if you're reporting an outage, I've had it happen where they just don't show up to come. They say they'll show up in 2 days, but then they don't show up, and then you have to start the claim all over again. Meanwhile, you're without power or without internet. So those things are definitely frustrating. And that leads into number 5, power outages, water outages, internet outages, road conditions, all of those things are problematic. Sometimes, like in Coronado area, they will be without water for days or weeks at a time. And this seems to be kind of consistent. And I don't know about other parts of the country, though I do know that in 𝐷𝐻𝐻, there were water outages also for like weeks at a time. Even people that had tanks, I think, like when the tank ran out and 𝐸DAN didn't have the water to refill. So those things are very frustrating. I don't like those power outages because when they go beyond a certain amount of hours, I just feel like I need to throw everything out in the fridge that is perishable because I'm just nervous about food safety. So those things are frustrating. And the road conditions, potholes. I've broken a tire rim on a pothole. Your car will get a beating. Shock absorbers and struts, you have to change like every 1.5 to 2 years because of the road conditions. The other frustrating thing is, depending on where you live, they might have like traffic. First of all, that's a thing that could be anywhere, but in Panama it just seems to be extra bad. Though I have to say, that's when you can appreciate the vendors that stand in the middle of the road on the highway selling snacks, because you might just want to buy a bag of chips and a soda for when you're waiting in traffic. But yeah, the traffic, and then the traffic cones. So when I was living in the Coronado area, on weekends, they would set up these traffic cones to where you couldn't turn left, like to get into Coronado on 𝐰𝐨𝐫𝐬𝐿. And that's frustrating. Like when you just want to get home and you have to drive further to turn left, to turn around, to sit in traffic, to then turn into the 𝐰𝐨𝐫𝐬𝐿 road. This might happen in other parts of the country too, but I was only experienced that in Coronado. And that's why most people will say they don't leave the house on the weekend, they stay home. Especially like during holidays when a lot of people from the city come out to the beach areas. A lot of people will just stay home during that time. Number 6 would be road closures due to protests. I didn't really know that was a common practice in Panama when I moved here. They don't have that on the glossy brochures. But the way that the Panamanians make their voices heard is to shut down the roads. And it is really inconvenient, and it doesn't make sense to many of us because it affects the economy, it affects tourism. A couple years ago when we had road closures for like 5 weeks, so many people canceled their trips, and we were just kind of recovering from all the COVID closures. Businesses lost tons of money, farmers lost money. It was just really, really bad for the economy. And it's unpredictable. You don't know what areas are going to be closed. When I was I had to go into the city during some of these closures, and I left at 4 a.m. to try and safely pass into the city, and then it's unknown if you're going to hit a roadblock coming out. I also had to cancel some travel back to the States and rearrange it because of planned roadblocks that were going to be happening in the city. So that is just a thing that happens here, that is a part of the culture. We thought that maybe with the different administration, there was going to be a little more intolerance of the road closures. But right now, there have been protests and road closures in Bocas del Toro in the province there. That's been going on for, I think, 5 weeks. There's news that they're going to be opening, but then there's news that there still are closures. And that's just the unpredictable nature of these roadblocks. And that is one of the things that I don't care for in Panama. Number 7, the last thing I have on my worst things about Panama is the burning in the dry season. Generally, it's mostly in the dry season. Farmers will often burn the remnants of the crops. You'll see fires just on the side of the road of like trees or brush being burned, which is odd because it's near, telephone poles and electricity poles. Trash gets burned. That has a horribly toxic, acrid odor. And because, the wind picks up in dry season, the smoke can just be really choking and uncomfortable. It's just bad. It's a bad practice. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for people to breathe it. And then if there is burning, like in the time of year where we don't have wind, then the smoke just kind of, settles and sits in places. So that is one of the worst things about being here. I don't know if they're trying to stop that. I've heard that it's not legal, but I don't really see a lot of enforcement. You don't hear a lot of enforcement about it. I guess that's a benefit of being in a gated community where there are probably rules against, burning. But even here in El Valle, you'll notice, some burning. And that is definitely on my list of negatives in Panama. All right, so that is my list of the best things about living in Panama and the worst things. For me, the best things far outweigh the worst things. I love the quality of life that I have living in Panama. I have my beautiful garden and am able to live a tranquil lifestyle where I have peace of mind, a slower pace of life, and I really value that and appreciate it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.